Amy lay sideways on the narrow bench, wrapped in nothing but a thin woolen coat. In the cramped corner of the room, there was a small heater with its indicator light off. The biting cold crept up from her feet all the way to her neck. The young policeman across from her rubbed his hands together, looking rather embarrassed. Sorry. It's the end of the year and we're swamped here. The wire's burned out. Please bear with it for a while. Once we clear up the misunderstanding, you can leave. He was a bit flustered these days. The relationship between the police and the public wasn't all that harmonious. Junior policemen like him had to be extremely cautious in their actions, fearing that they might offend someone and cause trouble for the station. Just by looking at the bag the woman was carrying, he could tell she was wealthy, someone he really couldn't afford to offend. That he quietly closed the door and went next door to check on the man who had caused the trouble and was still cursing. Amy had remained silent since entering the room. Now, she pulled her coat up over her ears and closed her eyes wearily. She was cold, sleepy, and seething with anger. Her phone in her coat pocket kept vibrating persistently. She took it out, glanced at it, and hung up immediately. About 20 minutes later, the voice of the young policeman came from outside again, a bit louder this time. You're here. Steady footsteps came from the outer room and reached Amy's ears through the bench. They were coming this way. Amy opened her eyes and sat up, pulling her coat around her. Almost at the same time, the door opened, and the big light on the ceiling turned on with a click. The glaring white light made Amy close her eyes briefly. The young policeman said at the door, "Captain Tom, this is the girl who assaulted him." The newcomer didn't say a word. Amy's eyes were still dazzled by the white light. She lowered her head slightly, covering her eyes with one hand, and let out a sigh of frustration. Damn it, she cursed inwardly for half a minute. When her eyes adjusted, she took a deep breath and looked up. The man standing opposite was tall and big, standing slightly against the light. From Amy's upward-looking angle, he was at least 6 feet 2 inches. He had a crew cut, wasn't in his police uniform, but wore a black sweater. His broad shoulders and the simple outline of the light behind him showed his firm facial features. The young policeman had just called him Captain Tom. Was he the captain of the police brigade? Amy stood up, grabbed her coat, and stared back indifferently. "Sir, have you retrieved the surveillance footage?" The man called Captain Tom nodded, handed a USB drive to the young policeman, and pointed outside. "Let's go out and watch it together." In less than 2 minutes, the young policeman, Mike, brought a laptop and placed it on the desk. A man with a bruised face was handcuffed to the side of the desk. As soon as he saw Amy, he shrank back, kicking his legs. "Damn it, officer. You have to protect my safety." Mike had been listening to his howls for half an hour and his head was pounding. He knocked on the table. "Shut up." The man just kept crying and wailing. Amy shot him a sideways look. "If you make another sound, I'll pull out your tongue." The man fell silent immediately. Mike's hands were red with frostbite as he shivered, trying to insert the USB drive. After fumbling for a long time, he still couldn't get it in. Amy had warmed her hands in her coat for a while and her hands were steady. She reached out. "Let me." Before she could finish, Captain Tom also reached out to help. Their hands accidentally touched. The other man wasn't wearing much, but his hands were much warmer than hers. His skin was tanned. His palms were broad, and there were a few light-colored scars on the back of his hand. Amy paused and then casually put her hand back in her pocket. The USB drive was connected. Mike skillfully found a video from 9 o'clock that evening and clicked to play it. The video showed a semi-dark road. 2 streetlights on the right were out, creating a dark area at the intersection. On such a cold day, there were only a few cars passing by, and very few pedestrians. Mike pressed the fast-forward button, skipped 10 minutes directly, and stopped. Amy appeared in the video. She was wearing an OL-style knitted sweater, black trousers, and an oatmeal-colored woolen coat. Looking out of place on this dark path, she walked slowly into the video, looking around from time to time as if looking for something. Soon, she reached the area where the streetlights were out. A dark figure flashed by the wall and suddenly rushed out. One hand covered her mouth, and the other firmly grabbed her right hand and dragged her towards the alley. Mike usually dealt with civil disputes. This was the first time he had seen such a scene. His eyes reddened and he turned to glare at the handcuffed man. The man shrank his neck. "Look further. Look further. What else is there to look at? What were you doing dragging her into the alley?" Mike rolled up his sleeves and slapped the man on the head a couple of times. Tom looked calm and held him back. Finish watching. Amy looked up at him. The video continued. The man, taking advantage of his physical strength, dragged Amy into the alley. The video seemed to freeze for 2 seconds as if swallowed by a black hole, even though he knew the victim was sitting here safely. Mike's heart was still tightly clenched. Then, the next second, the man in the video stumbled out. Amy, who was 5 feet 7 inches tall, grabbed the man by the back of his neck with one hand and dragged him 3 or 4 meters on the ground. All the way to the streetlight pole. The man seemed to be in shock. It took him a long time to get up from the ground. He spat on the ground and raised his hand to slap her. The video wasn't very clear. It was impossible to see Amy's expression clearly, only to see her side to avoid a bit. Backhand grabbed the man's wrist, twisted hard, not give him a chance to counterattack. A palm hit in his ear. See the man, that reaction cochlea injury is definitely not light. Presumably called the tinnitus to get confused. Amy multiplied the victory to pursue the attack. A foot kicked him in the lower body. That force. Mike couldn't help but clamp his legs together and let out a hiss. For the next 2 minutes, just as the man had complained, it was a one-sided beating by AMY.AT. The end of the video. Several policemen who came out to eat noodles heard the man's cries for help and rushed over to stop the violence. Mike pressed the pause button and was speechless for a moment. Who on earth was the perpetrator here? Amy stood aside, her arms crossed, expressionless. Self-defense. Tom's face was stern. He tapped his finger on the screen at the frozen image of her kicking the man in the groin. All I see is a 3-minute one-sided attack by you. At 9:42, he was already lying on the ground with no ability to attack. Your actions afterwards were nothing but venting your personal anger, weren't they? Mike nodded secretly behind him. This lady was so fierce. The man saw that both policemen were on his side. He pretended to cover his right face and started crying. Officers, you have to help me. I didn't mean anything. Look what she did to me. Amy sneered. You didn't mean anything. Or you couldn't do anything. She took a half step forward and looked up at Tom. If I didn't know martial arts and he dragged me into the alley, I'd be lying in the autopsy room of the criminal police station right now. Instead of standing here in the police station listening to you talk about this so-called one-sided attack. Captain Tom. Standing in front of Captain Tom. She was much shorter, but at this moment, Mike actually felt that she had an imposing aura. Her phoenix-shaped eyes seemed to be on fire. Tom's expression didn't change. He asked, "Why were you out here alone so late?" Was he going to blame the victim? Amy was so angry that she laughed. She stared into his light brown pupils and said word by word, "I was just bored." After signing, Amy picked up her bag and left without looking back. Her phone in her pocket was still ringing persistently. She took a deep breath and answered, "Mom." On the other end of the phone, her mother asked anxiously, "You really went to his workplace like that?" Amy's face was expressionless. "Yeah." "Oh, you didn't even say hello. That's so impolite. And you interrupted his work." Her mother scolded her a bit, then lowered her voice and asked, "So, what do you think? Is it going to work out?" "Sure," Amy sneered. "It'll work out when I'm dead." On the other side, 2 minutes after the person left, Mike, feeling like he'd survived a disaster, touched his arm. "Oh my God. I thought she was going to tear down the police station just now." Tom propped his hand on the table, pulled out the USB drive, and didn't comment. He just said, "Fix the heater as soon as possible. And those 2 streetlights on the road. Let's pool some money and hire someone to fix them." Sure. Mike obediently followed him around. The man handcuffed to the chair over there let out a sigh. "Officer, I think I might have a concussion from being beaten by that woman. Let me go to the hospital, please. I'm afraid something bad will happen if it's too late." Hearing this, Tom stopped, turned around, and glanced at him. "You were caught red-handed attempting a crime in front of the police station. A concussion is the least of your worries." Before leaving, Tom told Mike, "Lock up properly. He'll be detained and fined. Don't let him out if he's not honest." Mike saluted. "Got it." Tom nodded, picked up his windbreaker from the rack by the door, and walked out. The sky was overcast and gloomy, with not a single star in sight. It looked like it was about to snow. He felt the urge to smoke, so he leaned against a pillar and took out his cigarette case. Just as he lit a cigarette, His phone rang that he looked at the caller ID, smiled helplessly, and answered. Aunt Sarah. On the other end of the phone, his aunt's voice was nervous. Tom, I'm telling you, the girl I introduced to you is supposed to meet you tonight. Hurry up and change into some clean clothes. Take her out to eat something nice. Don't make a bad first impression. Before she could finish, Tom interrupted her. We've already met. There was a moment of silence. Ah, so soon. Then what do you think? What did he think? Tom laughed. She's not a good fit. It's just the first meeting. How can you tell it's not a good fit? I'm telling you, the girl has a great background and a good temper. She's just been going through a rough time with her job recently. Might be in a bad mood. Why don't you give it another chance? Going through a rough time with her job, Tom thought. No wonder she was so irritable. His aunt was still trying to persuade him. You're not getting any younger. It's not easy for you to find a partner with your job. When you meet someone suitable, you should seize the opportunity. Tom interrupted her again. She's really not a good fit. His aunt got angry. Then tell me, what exactly is wrong? At the first meeting, she had run into a hooligan even before they properly met. Everything about it felt wrong. Tom looked in the direction where the girl had disappeared at the end of the road, slowly exhaled a smoke ring, and said, She's too beautiful. I can't handle her. His aunt let out a long sigh. As if he was doomed to be alone forever, after hanging up the phone, Tom stubbed out the cigarette at the smoking area, stood there for a while, then pulled up the hood of his coat to block the wind and walked away without looking back. On Monday morning, Amy woke up at 4 o'clock. While washing up in a daze, she suddenly remembered that she didn't need to get up early for work today. She was going to pack her things. Her expression turned indifferent. She slowly washed the foam off her face. She had been working for over 3 years and had never arrived at the company later than 7:30. Thinking about it, she grabbed a face towel, wiped her face casually, turned around, and went back to the bedroom. She threw back the covers and lay down again. She was going to sleep until 2 o'clock in the afternoon today. At 5:30, Amy opened her eyes, feeling frustrated. Damn this biological clock. At 6:30, she got dressed and drove to the company. Amy worked for a well-known advertising and planning company. After 3 years of hard work, she had become the department manager. Half a month ago, she had submitted her resignation. The HR department had made a token effort to persuade her to stay, then readily approved her departure and even cut the handover process in half. Amy stood at the bottom of the company building, took a deep breath, and walked in with her high heels clicking. Before she reached the employee passage, she was stopped by the security guard. Ms. Amy, please register as a visitor here. Amy raised her eyebrows. Visitor registration. Yes, we received a notice last Friday that you no longer work here. Please follow the visitor process for registration. Amy smiled politely. Sure. As she was signing her name, she cursed inwardly. She had been signing a lot these days. The receptionist, Lucy, gave her an elevator card and accompanied her upstairs. Lucy kept sighing, hesitant to speak. When pressing the elevator button, she leaned over and whispered, It's Mr. David's order. Amy wasn't surprised. I know. The elevator went up floor by floor and finally stopped at the 26th floor. It was still early. Usually, there was no one in the company at this time. When she entered, May, who was sitting by the door, gave her a look. Amy followed her gaze and saw that the door of her office was wide open. A figure was sitting behind the desk, talking to someone in a soft, flirtatious voice. Amy greeted May and walked over as if nothing was wrong. She knocked on the door. The voices of a man and a woman inside stopped at the same time, and they looked over. Lisa stood up from her seat, wearing a bright smile. Amy, you're here so early. Amy forced a smile. Not as early as you. Lisa tucked her hair behind her ear, looking a bit embarrassed. I just took over your work. I'm afraid I can't handle it. Look, I've been working on this half of the poster all morning, but I still don't think it fits the theme. Amy glanced at the computer screen and noticed that her heated desk mat had been thrown away and replaced with a pink mouse pad. She withdrew her gaze, walked over, and directly deleted the layer with a click. It's my fault. It's best to delete it and start over. Lisa's face froze. She turned to look at David. Mr. David, it won't be possible to meet the deadline if we start over. At this time, David, who had been sitting on the sofa, listening to the women's argument, slowly straightened up. His eyes casually swept over Amy's uniform skirt and he smiled. I have faith in your abilities. Lisa pouted coquettishly. Amy held back her nausea, picked up the small storage box on the table, and said, It seems there's nothing left to hand over. Then I'll be leaving. Last Friday, David had been all business, saying she had to come to work on Monday to hand over. But now, he didn't act like a boss at all. He said lazily, Let me walk you out. No need to trouble yourself. It's no trouble. After all, we were colleagues. David picked up his coat and walked out on his own. Amy entered the elevator and refused his offer to go downstairs together. He stood outside the elevator, his arms crossed, smiling playfully. If you find a better job in the future, remember that I walked you out on your last day here. It's like I'm your last man. Amy was immune to his flirting. She closed the elevator door expressionlessly. The elevator went straight down. Amy greeted the familiar faces at the front desk as usual and walked to the garage in her high heels. At 7:30 in the morning, there were few cars in the garage. She walked towards her black car with the box in her arms. When she stopped in front of the driver's seat, her mind was full of David's annoying words. She felt goosebumps all over her body. Ugh, she took a deep breath and kicked the car door hard. You're not my last man, you jerk. The thin heel of her shoe instantly made a dent in the car door. Amy stared at the dent for a few seconds. Her anger subsided a little. She took out her car keys and pressed the button. The lights didn't flash. She frowned and pressed the button 2 more times. She reached out to open the car door. It still wouldn't open. Amy. A bad thought flashed through her mind, just as she was about to go to the front of the car to check the license plate. The window of the driver's seat slowly rolled down, revealing a face with sharp lines. Amy's face froze. She slowly turned her head and saw an identical black Buick parked behind her car. Except that her own car didn't have a big dent in the door. Tom lowered his eyes to glance at the car door, then looked up at her. His cold and stern face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost, and he called her name in a dangerous tone. Amy. Amy had never been so embarrassed in her life, and it was in front of a blind date partner who she just didn't seem to get along with from the start. What's more, he probably didn't even know that they had been set up on a blind date. Amy let out a sigh of exasperation, took out a business card from the storage box, and said, Captain Tom, I'm really sorry. I'll cover the cost of repairing the car. Just send me the bill via text message later. Tom took the card, glanced at it. It read, Zhaoyun Advertising, General Manager of the Planning Department. He casually threw it into the glove box and replied with a cold, what a jerk. Amy cursed under her breath, turned around, opened the car door, threw the storage box onto the back seat, plopped down into the driver's seat, reversed the car, and drove away. Tom sat in his car, watching her leave. He leaned back against the seat, his right hand gently tapping on the Bluetooth headset. Less than 2 seconds later, that car suddenly stopped again. Amy opened the car door and got out, with a sullen face. She walked back. Tom didn't expect her to come back and seemed a little startled. The woman's stiletto heels clattered loudly on the concrete floor of the underground garage, the sound echoing in the space. Amy walked straight up to Tom's car, slapped the car door hard with her right hand, her eyes blazing with anger. You knew who I was, right? Tom slightly frowned and sat up a little straighter. What? My name. You called my name accurately just now, before looking at my business card. You knew exactly who I was. Tom was taken aback, then composed himself. You signed at the police station. Amy sneered. I signed as Chi Ni Ma. All of Amy's pent-up anger from the morning burst out. So you knew from the beginning that I was your blind date partner, Tom said. These things are probably not suitable to be discussed here. Why not? In your eyes, is there anyone or anywhere that's suitable? He knew very well that she had run into that hooligan because she was going to the police station to meet him. Yet he had seriously taken the hooligan's side. And then he told the matchmaker that he couldn't match up with her because she was too beautiful. Go to hell, Tom. You deserve to be single for 30 years. Tom's face didn't change at all. He said calmly, I'm 28 this year. That should be in the information the matchmaker gave you. Amy was so angry that she tore off her work ID and threw it at him. Right. A 28-year-old virgin. After that, She turned around and left. The black car honked twice loudly and disappeared from the garage. Tom watched the taillights turn a corner and disappear. He let out a soft hiss. The edge of the plastic-covered work ID had scratched his neck, leaving a red mark. In the dead silence, voices came through the earpiece from the monitor. Damn, what did I just hear? Captain Tom went on a blind date. He pretended not to know and rejected the girl. Damn it, this girl has a nice voice, Mike said. I always feel like I've heard it somewhere before. Tom tapped on the earpiece. Shut up. Ouch. After finishing the resignation procedures, Amy officially started her unemployed life. She had been working hard for the past few years and rarely took annual leave. Suddenly being free, she didn't know what to do with herself. She spent a week but still couldn't adjust her 5:30 in the morning biological clock. Amy's mother was worried and came to visit her several times. You've lost your job and got rejected by that guy. Don't do anything stupid. Amy was curled up on the sofa, watching a variety show. What do you mean I'm heartbroken? I'm not even in a relationship. Wasn't it that captain I introduced to you last time? He rejected you, didn't he? Amy snorted. What? Is he going around telling everyone he rejected me? No. He was very polite. He said his job was too dangerous and he was afraid of dragging you down. Standing up for hooligans every day. It is dangerous. I'm afraid one day a victim will come to their senses and stab him first. Amy's mother said. How can you talk like that? Xiao Chen has a good personality. I think someone like him is just what you need to temper your hot temper. Amy didn't feel like arguing. Her mother helped her stock up the fridge and before leaving, she reminded, it's good to rest at home. But don't be too lazy. Remember to go out and exercise. Amy replied perfunctorily. Okay, got it. You can go now. Her mother left, muttering all the way, just stay at home like a couch potato. You'll regret it when you get fat. Half a month later, Amy accidentally stepped on the scale and found that she had gained 2 pounds. She was in a bad mood. The next day, she woke up at 5:30, quickly changed into her sportswear, put on her headphones, and went for a morning run in the park outside the community. It was already deep winter. At 5:30, the sky was still dark, covered with a hazy mist. The cold wind blew in her face, making her shiver. Amy shrank back as she pushed the door open and jogged along the park's green belt. She had only run half a lap when her phone on the armband rang. Amy glanced at it and hung up immediately. The phone kept ringing for 2 more minutes before finally stopping. Since she left her job, strange numbers had been calling her almost every day. In the first few days, Amy would answer, but later she found that they were all harassing calls from David. After blocking him, he would just call from another number. There was no way to avoid it. Moreover, this phone number had the contacts she had accumulated over the years at work, and she didn't want to change it easily. She could only passively wait for David's crazy behavior to stop. Amy let out an exasperated sigh and started running faster. After running 3 laps, she started to feel warm, but not to the point of sweating. It was the most comfortable state for her. Amy slowly stopped and her eyes fell on the vending machine in the corner. She was a little thirsty. She walked slowly towards the back of the bushes, breathing slightly heavily. There was a man standing in front of the vending machine, wearing a black and white sports shirt, drinking water with his head raised. Amy didn't wear her contact lenses. Squinting, she looked at the man's profile. She thought he should be good looking, at least. Someone who could go running at 5 in the morning in winter must be in good shape. Casually thinking about it, she walked up to the vending machine on the right and tapped the screen for a while. She found that the QR code scanner seemed to be broken, showing only a blurred black shadow. She couldn't scan the code and she didn't have any change either. Amy looked at the man next to her. After hesitating for 2 seconds, she walked over. Excuse me, could you lend me 2 coins? The QR code scanner on this machine is broken. The man seemed to pause when he saw her. Then he silently took out 2 coins from his trouser pocket. Thank you. Amy took the coins, bought a bottle of mineral water, opened it, and took a couple of sips. Then she turned to the man and said, "Let me scan your payment code. I'll pay you back." "No need." The man replied indifferently. This voice. Tom. "Oh, it's you. I thought I met your twin sister." Wearing home-style sportswear, with no makeup on. Looking so well behaved when asking for money and even saying thank you politely, Amy was sure that she and this man were just not compatible. Every time they met, it was extremely embarrassing, come to think of it. When she was introduced to Tom, she was told that he lived nearby, which was convenient for them to meet. What a bad luck. She lowered her head, tapped her phone a couple of times, and held it out. Scan me then. Tom didn't move. No need. Amy insisted, staring at him with her half-blind eyes in silence. Finally, Tom said, "Then buy me breakfast. $2 is only enough to buy one steamed bun. I'm going to fix my car tomorrow." Amy said, "Sure, Captain Tom. I'll buy you whatever you want." 15 minutes later, Amy and Tom were sitting face to face in a breakfast restaurant. She felt that the world was full of surprises. Half a month ago, she would never have thought that she would one day invite this annoying man to breakfast, but now, after so many days, Amy didn't care anymore. Sitting like this, she even felt like chatting with him. "Captain Tom, do you live around here?" "Yeah. Not working today. On leave." "Oh." The conversation stalled. Amy thought to herself that there was always a reason why some people were single. At this time, their noodle soups were served. Amy leaned forward, picked up the spoon, and started eating with her head down. Not long after, her phone on the table rang again. Seeing that Amy didn't react, Tom reminded her, "Not going to answer. It's a harassing call." After saying that, she suddenly realized something and looked up. "Captain Tom, dealing with this kind of civil dispute is within your responsibility, right?" Tom's expression was a bit strange. "Civil dispute? Yeah. My ex-colleague has been harassing me by changing numbers for half a month. Are you going to do something about it?" It was a question, but with one hand on the edge of the bowl, she was clearly implying, "If you say no, I'll pour chili oil on you." Tom silently glanced at her hand, then reached out. "Let me see." Amy handed him the phone. The incoming call was still showing on the screen. From an out-of-town number, Tom swiped to answer and turned on the speaker. "Hello." There was a sudden silence on the other end. After 2 seconds, David's voice came through the receiver, maybe because of the speakerphone. It sounded scratchy and a bit eerie. "Who are you? Where's Amy?" "Amy." Tom looked at Amy and asked, "Who are you?" A sinister voice came from the other end. "I'm her boyfriend." Amy frowned and shook her head at Tom, then they heard the voice lower and laugh. "Amy, you're listening, right? It's only been a few days since you left the company, and you've already found someone new. Don't worry, I'll come find you." After that, the call ended with a click. The last sentence had a low, soft, and menacing tone, making Amy's skin crawl. Tom's face darkened. He opened the call log and saw a long list of unremarked missed calls over the past half-month. All from him. Amy nodded. Tom took out his own phone and took a picture of the number in the call log. "Where do you live?" Amy pointed to the community directly opposite the back door of the breakfast restaurant. "Building 3, Unit 6, Room 608. Tom nodded and handed the phone back to her. "Lock your doors these days and don't go out." "Is that it?" Tom looked up at her. "Aren't you a black belt in Taekwondo? What else do you want?" "I want to punch your face." Amy pushed her chair back and stood up. "Boss, check the bill. Coming. Do you want to pay separately or together?" Amy said expressionlessly. "Just for the bowl in front of me and one steamed bun for him." "Tom." Amy paid the bill, put her hands in her pockets, and left. The community was right behind the breakfast restaurant. Tom sat there, watching her walk briskly to the community entrance, swipe her card, and go in. There was a facial recognition system. The community's security measures were quite good. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Mike. "Captain Tom, a few of us are on leave today. Do you want to have dinner together this afternoon? Thanks for helping out at the station some time ago," Mike said, then smiled sheepishly. "Also, I passed the entry exam. I'll start my internship at your place next week." Tom smiled. "That's great. Hee hee. I'll need your help when I get there. Come on, let's have a meal together." Tom picked up the juicy steamed bun on the table, took a bite, and said unhurriedly, "Not today. I've got something on." On this day, Amy polished her resume and carefully applied to several companies online, waiting for their replies. For dinner, She made a salad with the fruits and vegetables in the fridge and watched a variety show to kill time. At 7 or 8 o'clock. She practiced yoga for an hour as usual. It was already very late. After taking a bath, Amy specifically went to the entrance to check the door lock. There was no sign of anything unusual, although she was very good at martial arts. Amy was still a girl. She wasn't afraid of ordinary hooligans. But for someone as crazy as David, she preferred to stay away. This morning, when she mentioned it to Tom, she didn't really expect the police to come and protect her. After all, it was the end of the year and the police were busy. How could they keep an eye on a civilian like her every day? But Tom's indifferent attitude really pissed her off. The lights in the room were on brightly. Amy was sitting on the bed, leaning against the headboard with her laptop in her arms. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. And there was also a hint of fear mixed in. Damn Tom. He deserved to be single at 28. And he was still a captain. Bah. While cursing, the phone on the bedside table suddenly rang. It was a strange number. Amy's heart skipped a beat. Out of anger, she answered the call. David, are you crazy? There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then a voice said, it's me. Ha. Amy took the phone away, looked at the number, and then put it back to her ear. Tom. Yeah. What are you calling for? There was the sound of the wind blowing on the other end of the phone. An incredible thought flashed through Amy's mind. Her heart was pounding. She threw off the covers, got out of bed barefoot, walked to the balcony, and gently lifted a corner of the curtain to look down. You, aren't you standing downstairs at my place? You're overthinking. I'm having dinner with friends. Oh. Amy's fluttering romantic hopes crashed and burned. With a blank expression, she said, how thoughtful of you to call me while you're having dinner. Has that guy come to bother you? Amy sneered. Thanks for your concern, Captain Tom. By the time you remembered, I'd probably be in the hospital, fighting for my life. Amy unleashed a barrage of sarcasm, engaging in a prickly conversation with him on the phone for about 10 minutes. The more she talked, the bolder she became. And strangely enough, she wasn't scared at all. Finally, Tom probably got annoyed. He simply said, go to bed early, and hung up first. Amy never did figure out the purpose of that call. Amy was on edge for a few days. But since nothing out of the ordinary happened at home, she gradually let her guard down. One day, when she went out to take out the trash, she overheard 2 neighbors across the hall chatting. These past few days, every time I get up in the middle of the night, I see a man standing at the door. He just leans against the railing and smokes without saying a word. It's really creepy. Yeah, I noticed that too. There were cigarette butts on the ground when I woke up in the morning. Amy subconsciously glanced at the floor in front of her door. It was spotless, with no signs. Besides, David didn't smoke. Was it just a coincidence? She paid it little mind and just let it go. One day, she suddenly received a call from the HR department of Sunny Advertising. Manager Amy, would it be convenient for you to come to the company today? Amy's first thought was that David was up to some silly game again. Without hesitation, she refused. I'm not available. But the girl's voice was cut off. Someone else took the phone and said in a serious tone, Ms. Amy, this is the El City Criminal Police Brigade. Our officers are on their way to pick you up. Please cooperate and come to the company. Amy was stunned. Criminal police. What did they want with her? Before she could even react, the doorbell started ringing non-stop. She opened the door and saw a familiar face. Mike was wearing a police uniform with a trainee tag around his neck. He grinned and said, hello, Ms. Amy. On the way, Mike tried to explain the situation in a gentle manner to reassure her. Don't worry, it's just a routine interview. Amy sat in the back seat, struggling to come to terms with what was happening. David was dead, and he was murdered. She felt a sense of absurdity, as if a plot from a TV show had been forcefully thrust into reality. When they arrived at the company, the entire building was in a state of panic. People were scurrying around, too afraid to speak. May was sitting in the break room outside, looking flustered. When she saw Amy, she rushed over. Manager Amy, you've been called in too. May said that all the women who had been harassed by David in the company were being called in for individual interrogations because the police initially suspected that the perpetrator was a woman. Amy was still confused. She was led by a female police officer to a small meeting room and told to sit down. The interrogation didn't start immediately. It seemed like they were waiting for someone, since Mike knew her to some extent. He followed her into the room with enthusiasm. He was holding a small tray. First, he handed a cup of tea to the female police officer. And then he came back and offered one to Amy. "Ms. Amy. Have some tea." "Thank you." She had been in a rush on the way and didn't wear gloves. Her hands were red from the cold wind. Now, she was warming them by cupping the cup while waiting. Amy asked Mike, "Aren't you from the civilian police team? Why are you involved in this criminal case?" Mike scratched his head and laughed sheepishly. "I've been preparing for an exam. I just passed and joined the criminal police team not long ago." "That's really impressive." Amy sincerely complimented him. Her sincere words made Mike feel a bit shy. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at her. Amy had a cold and glamorous appearance. She had an oval face and slightly long and narrow phoenix-shaped eyes. When she didn't smile, she looked cold and unapproachable. But when she did, her eyes would curve into crescents, making her look kind of cute. Mike clasped his hands nervously, thinking, such a beautiful lady. Yet Captain Tom doesn't seem to be interested. After about 10 minutes, the door of the opposite meeting room opened. Amy saw Dream from the PR department downstairs come out with slightly red-rimmed eyes. She wondered if Dream had been scolded. Behind Dream, a tall figure emerged slowly. He was wearing a dark-colored police uniform, holding his police cap in his hand, revealing a cold and stern facial profile. Amy was stunned. What was he doing here? Tom also saw her. He didn't seem surprised. He tapped the door casually and then closed it behind him. The female police officer walked over and greeted Captain Tom. "Yeah." Mike quickly stood up and offered his seat. "Captain Tom, please have a seat." "No need, Grace. You can start the interrogation." His voice sounded a bit hoarse. He walked to the water dispenser and helped himself to a cup of water. Amy was completely bewildered. Was this Captain Tom not the captain of the civilian police brigade, but the captain of the criminal police detachment? Grace, the female police officer, sat down opposite Amy, tapped the table, and got straight to the point. "Ms. Amy, what's your relationship with David?" Amy turned her gaze away from the other side of the room and replied, "We were colleagues. He was my boss." "According to other colleagues, David has been pursuing you for the past few months." Amy corrected. "It wasn't a pursuit. It was harassment." She took out her phone from her pocket, scrolled to the call record page, and said, "These are all the harassing calls he made." The female police officer frowned and took out her own phone to start taking pictures as evidence. Amy wanted to say that Captain Tom had already taken pictures of these, but the words got stuck in her throat and she swallowed them back. "You've been working in this company for 3 years. You were likely to get promoted at the end of the year. Why did you suddenly resign? Was it because of David?" "Yes. His harassment got worse. So I quit." Amy calmly and systematically described David's over-the-line actions in the recent period. Once, during a business trip, it rained heavily. David used the excuse that his driver's license was revoked and he missed the late-night high-speed train. He forced her to stay overnight in a strange city. At 12 o'clock at night, he came to knock on her door. Amy didn't let him in, and he almost broke in on his own. After that business trip, Amy submitted several complaint letters to the company's management, but they got no response. So she resigned. Tom listened while holding his cup of water. He thought that her excessive self-defense against that hooligan during their first meeting now made sense. The female police officer took notes quickly in her notebook and then asked, "So, did you have any extreme thoughts of revenge?" Upon hearing this, Amy laughed. "What do you mean by extreme? If my thoughts could come true, he would probably die a miserable death." The female police officer's pen paused. She realized that her question had made Amy defensive and subconsciously glanced at Tom. Before, Captain Tom had interrogated the other suspects himself. As soon as he put on a serious face, those young girls' psychological defenses crumbled, and they even confessed to putting expired coffee beans in David's tea. But now, he seemed to be avoiding the issue. Soon, she understood the reason. After learning about the basic background, Grace changed the topic and got straight to the crucial point. "At 10 p.m. on the 9th, where were you?" "The 9th was the day before yesterday. I was at home alone." "Is there anyone who can testify for you?" Amy shook her head. Grace put a cross in the alibi column. At this moment, Tom, who had been silent since entering the room, spoke up. I can testify for her. The three people present were all taken aback. She stayed at home from 9 p.m. on the 9th and didn't go out. She went to the gym downstairs in the community at around 8 p.m. You can check the surveillance footage for evidence. The suburb where David had the accident is a 2-hour drive from Amy's community. It's impossible for her to get there and commit the crime at 10 p.m. Amy asked, "How do you know that?" She had gone for a swim in the apartment's swimming pool on a whim that day and had even forgotten about it herself. Just then, the phone on the table dinged with a new message. Grace picked it up, took a look, and suddenly stood up. Captain Tom. The technical team found a small amount of blood under the front bumper of Amy's car. It's very likely to be David's. Mike frowned nervously. Confused about the current situation, Amy was stunned at first. She subconsciously looked at Tom. Seeing that he was calm, she belatedly relaxed. Tom's car had a big dent kicked by Amy, and he hadn't had time to get it repaired after that unpleasant breakfast. Amy came back. She threw her car keys on Tom's desk and said, "I'll get your car repaired. Since our cars are the same model, you can drive mine in the meantime. You detained me at the police station for 2 hours, and I kicked a dent in your car door. We're even." Tom glanced at the furry doll on the keychain and didn't refuse. That dented car had just been returned from the repair shop yesterday. Amy hadn't even had time to tell Tom to exchange the cars. So how did it get David's blood on it the day before? The situation took a sudden turn. Amy changed from a suspect to a key person under protection. Tom believed that the murderer didn't choose Amy as a scapegoat without reason. There must be some element of personal grudge involved. Tom and Mike changed into civilian clothes and secretly followed Amy back home. Before the murderer was caught, they had the obligation to protect Amy's personal safety. This was Mike's first time on such a mission. Seeing Amy hesitate, he tugged at the corner of his clothes and said, "If you're worried about the impact, I can ask Sister Grace to replace me." "That's not necessary." That female police officer still seemed to be suspicious of her. Compared with her, Amy would rather have Mike and Tom with her. However, Amy said, "I'm just one person. Isn't it a waste of police resources for 2 of you to guard me?" Mike was driving in the front. Hearing this, he said, "Captain Tom always tells us that protecting citizens' safety is the exact opposite of wasting police resources. Don't worry about it." "Really?" Amy glanced at the person in the passenger seat through the rear-view mirror. She thought that he hadn't said that to her before. Tom hadn't spoken since getting in the car. He closed his eyes, and it was hard to tell if he was really asleep or just pretending. The heat in the car was a bit too high. Once they got out and were hit by the cold wind, they were more likely to get sick. Tom's face was slightly red today, and he didn't look energetic. Could it be that he got sick from staying outside her door in the cold these past few nights? Amy shook her head, pushing these thoughts aside for the moment. She leaned on the small platform between the passenger and driver seats and reached over to adjust the air conditioning vent that was blowing directly at the passenger seat. Mike glanced over quickly. "Is the heat too high?" Amy nodded. "It's not good to have the heat blowing directly." "Haha, we big guys don't pay much attention to that." With most of her body hanging in the middle of the seats. Just as she was about to retract her hand and sit back, Tom suddenly opened his eyes. His cold, dark eyes stared at her silently. The distance between them was a bit too close. Amy thought that at such a close distance, he could probably see the pores on her face. She had been in a rush to go out today and hadn't had time to put on makeup. After thinking about it, she felt it was absurd. So what if she didn't wear makeup? It wasn't like she was on a date. She averted her eyes and was about to sit back when he suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist. Amy was startled. "You." Tom opened his mouth, and his voice was as rough as sandpaper. "Do you have any fever-reducing medicine at home?" The palm against her wrist was burning hot. Only then did Amy realize something was wrong. "Are you running a fever?" "Yeah." When they got home, Amy settled Tom on the sofa bed in the living room. She brought an electronic thermometer and measured his temperature. It was 103.6 F, 39.8 C. A high fever. He was still conscious. He turned his head to watch her direct Mike to boil water. With a slightly sullen face, he asked, "Are you worried?" Amy was squatting in front of the storage cabinet under the TV, looking for medicine. She was distracted and replied, "What?" Is it unsettling to have a sick person protecting you? Amy's hand holding the cold medicine paused. She looked back at him. No. I won't let anything happen to you. Okay. She was telling the truth. For some reason, with Tom here, she felt at ease. Even thinking back to that strange phone call that ended in an argument, she still felt a sense of security. She lowered her head, tucked her long hair behind her shoulders, and asked, "Are you allergic to any medicine?" "No." Tom watched her rummage through the medicine box, hesitating between two kinds of cold medicine. It was obvious that she didn't get sick often. He couldn't help but smile. "Take Tylenol. If you have an anti-inflammatory pill, take one too. It'll work faster." "Is it okay to take them together?" Amy frowned, took out the instructions for the two medicines, and sat cross-legged on the carpet to study their properties. When she first moved out on her own, she would just take any medicine that seemed to suit her symptoms when she was sick. Once, when she had a cold and it coincided with her period, she took Tylenol and ibuprofen together and almost ended up in the emergency room. Since then, she had been extremely cautious about taking mixed medications. After studying for a while, she only took out the Tylenol and handed it to him. "Take this first. If it doesn't work, we'll take the anti-inflammatory pill." The carpet was laid in front of the sofa. When she turned her head, the distance between them suddenly closed. She found Tom staring intently at her. His brown pupils reflected her image. Amy was spellbound by his glassy eyes. The Tylenol was still in her hand, and she was so stunned that she forgot to speak. To avoid tipping off the suspect, they had come in through the garage. Tom had taken off his police uniform and hung it on the back of the sofa. He was wearing a dark-colored sweater inside, looking less stern than in the company. With a hint of domesticity. Tom's gaze moved from her beautiful double eyelids to her straight nose, then from the small mole on the tip of her nose to her light-colored thin lips. He lowered his head slowly and leaned in. Just then, Mike burst in from the kitchen. "Ms. Amy, your cups are so beautiful. Which one can I use to drink water?" As he entered the living room, he suddenly fell silent. Tom was lying on the sofa, and Amy was sitting beside him. They were very close. The back of the sofa blocked most of their figures. All that could be seen was Amy's hand holding the medicine box resting on the back of the sofa, and half of her body next to the sofa, hearing the sound. Amy suddenly came to her senses. She threw the Tylenol at Tom, quickly stood up, and rushed to the bedroom. "The blue-colored glasses in that row are for guests. Help yourselves." Then the bedroom door slammed shut. Mike sensed the strange atmosphere in the living room and lowered his voice to ask, "Captain Tom, what's going on?" Tom grabbed the medicine box, leaned back on the sofa dejectedly, covered his eyes with his arm, and said hoarsely, "I'm delirious from the fever." Amy hid in her room until dinner time. Mike was diligent and ordered several home-cooked takeout dishes. He called out a couple of times, but there was no response. Mike thought he understood. If he wasn't mistaken, Ms. Amy was about to make a move on Captain Tom, a sick and defenseless officers, and a lady with amazing martial arts skills. This was so exciting. Captain Tom had been single for so many years. Many girls with a crush on him had given up in despair. Finally, a dark horse candidate appeared. Mike felt a great responsibility. It was a pity that they were still in the middle of a case. After taking the medicine, Tom rested in the living room for a while. Then he opened his laptop and contacted his colleagues at the Municipal Bureau to find out the progress of the case. David was the second son of a shareholder in Sunny Advertising. He returned from overseas after further study a year ago and was directly appointed as the assistant general manager of the company. In the past year, he had caused a lot of trouble with the female colleagues in the department. On the phone, Ryan said, "David has been pestering Amy for 2 or 3 months. Amy has never given in. It said that once he tried to get fresh with her in the break room, and she almost beat him up." As Tom listened, he thought distractedly that it was indeed in line with her personality. "I was thinking, could the perpetrator be an ex-girlfriend of David's after he returned from abroad? Maybe out of anger at being dumped and jealousy towards Amy. She framed Amy by hitting someone with a car. After all, the last navigation destination in David's car was a new motel on the outskirts." "I don't think so," Tom said, tapping his fingers on the coffee table. The motel was registered under David's name. Given his character, It's unlikely that he would take the initiative to ask an ex-girlfriend he dumped to go out. It's more likely to be a woman he just started dating or was still in the flirting stage. He always uses promotion opportunities to pressure women into submission. Right. Could this woman have agreed to the appointment for that reason? Ryan pondered for a moment and discussed with their colleagues. They thought both possibilities existed, but after checking everyone's alibis, they found that everyone had an unshakable alibi right now. The main problem is that there's too little evidence. It snowed heavily in the suburbs yesterday, which destroyed a lot of evidence. We can only count on your psychological tactics to work. The murderer didn't know that Amy's car had just been retrieved from the repair shop. Seeing Amy being released and going home, the first reaction must be that there was a problem with the blood smeared on the bottom of the car. If the murderer was bold enough, they might even try again. Tom found it strange that the murderer could smear blood on the bottom of Amy's car, which meant they knew Amy's community and her usual parking place. They were bold and careful, but they were so careless as to get Amy's license plate number wrong. This seemed contradictory, and he couldn't figure it out. That he frowned and unconsciously took out his cigarette pack from his pocket. He tapped one out but then held back. Mike had been taking notes beside him. At this moment, he said, "So, the murderer will most likely just create more evidence of the murder downstairs and won't actually attack Ms. Amy, right?" Tom was taken aback. His throat started to itch, and he coughed a few times, lowering his head when he learned that the murderer was targeting Amy. His first thought was that she was in danger. Still feeling dizzy from the fever, he immediately called his superiors to request a protection order. Tom rubbed his face. Speechless, Mike scratched his head, not understanding. Then he had an idea. "Hey, why don't I go downstairs and help Sue and the others keep watch?" This way, he could learn how to keep surveillance and avoid being a third wheel. It was a win-win situation. "What are you going for? To cause trouble for Sue?" Mike pouted. "Captain Tom, you don't know me well enough. Besides, my practical score is 80. Come show off when you get 100. While Mike was pestering Tom, the bedroom door opened with a soft click. The two people in the living room looked over simultaneously. Amy came out wearing home clothes, yawning and dragging her slippers. Her long curly hair was a bit messy, hanging down her back. She looked like she had just woken up. Seeing the two of them looking at her without speaking, she took a light pink glass from the closet to pour water. Her voice was a bit groggy. "Have you guys eaten?" Mike blinked. This wasn't the lovesick state he had imagined. He replied, "We've eaten. There's a portion left for you in the thermos." "Thanks." Amy went to the bathroom to wash her face, tied her long hair into a messy bun at the back of her head, and came back with the bowl. "What were you guys talking about just now?" Taking the opportunity, Mike made a decision first and informed later. "I'm going downstairs to keep watch." Amy looked out the window at the wind blowing the paper strips around. Outside, images of undercover cops in TV shows, wearing coats and sunglasses, squatting in corners, came to her mind. Mike waved his hand. "No, in the car." But they couldn't keep the heater on all the time, could they? Amy thought for a moment and said, "Wait a sec." She went back to the bedroom and soon came back with a nearly full blue ointment tube. "This is for frostbite. Your hands look pretty bad. It must be uncomfortable with the heater on in the car. Give it a try. It works well." Mike was stunned. He subconsciously looked down at his red and swollen fingers. He had been working at the police station for over 2 years, dealing with trivial matters in all kinds of weather. Frostbite was a common problem every winter among the group of men. No one really cared about it. They just endured it until winter was over. The first time he met Tom was at a criminal investigation lecture held by the Municipal Bureau last year. He rushed to attend it and specifically went to talk to Tom. Tom had a calm expression and handed him an application form. "You missed the application deadline this year. You can try again next year." When leaving, Tom glanced at his hands. "Go back and apply some ointment. They're cracked and bleeding." At that time, he secretly decided to pass the exam and join the Municipal Bureau to work with Captain Tom. A year later, the frostbite recurred. He didn't expect that this time. It was Amy, the girl he had a rather unpleasant first meeting with. Who cared about it? Captain Tom still said they weren't a good match. They were clearly a match made in heaven. Mike's nose felt a bit sour. He took the frostbite ointment and sniffed. "Ms. Amy, go for it. You can definitely win Captain Tom's heart. Amy thought he was talking about the case and nodded. With you guys around, I feel at ease. Mike hugged the ointment and went downstairs. Sniffling, the door clicked shut. And only Amy and Tom were left in the house. Amy looked calm and carried the bowl back to her room. When passing by the sofa, Tom called out to her, "What about me? Don't I get any of that ointment?" Amy glanced at his broad hands, which were slightly red. "I think Captain Tom's hands are so delicate that you don't need it." Then she went into her room and closed the door again. Tom stared at her door for 2 seconds. His phone received a WeChat message from Mike. "Captain Tom. Ms. Amy is really touching. I've changed my mind. I definitely support you two being together." Tom just glanced at it and ignored it when they were introduced. His aunt had praised this girl's good personality. Although Amy seemed arrogant at first, her actions spoke volumes since their first meeting. She had always been thoughtful. Tom leaned back on the sofa. The small mole on the tip of her nose came to his mind, and he felt an even stronger urge to smoke. Mike said he was going downstairs to keep watch, and he didn't come back upstairs all night with a man in the house. Amy didn't do yoga in the living room. After dinner, she stayed in her room watching TV, but she couldn't concentrate. She kept wondering if he was bored in the living room alone. At 12 o'clock at night, Amy got up to use the bathroom. She took a distant look at the living room. Tom's police uniform was neatly placed on the armrest of the sofa, but there was no sign of him. She frowned and unconsciously took 2 steps towards the living room. Suddenly, she heard a deep voice behind her. "Over here." She turned around and saw a figure standing against the balcony railing. There was a bright yellow glow at the tip of his finger. He was smoking. The white smoke rings and the white breath from his words dissipated in the wind. "Am I bothering you?" He was still running a fever and yet was outside smoking in the wind. He really didn't care about his health. Amy deliberately replied with a hum. "No smoking in my house." Tom nodded, stubbed out the cigarette, and threw it into the can beside him. His voice was still rough. "Still up, just about to sleep." He walked over. The corridor light illuminated his chest, arms, and face from below. He carried the cold of the night and the smell of cigarettes. He stopped 2 meters away and didn't move forward. "I just got the news. Mike and the others caught someone downstairs. I'll take you to identify them tomorrow." Amy was surprised. So soon. Blood coagulates. If they didn't act quickly, there would be no chance to frame Amy again. "Who is it?" Tom thought for a moment and named a person. "Yvonne." Amy frowned. "I've never heard of her." "We'll talk about it at the station tomorrow." Amy nodded. Then she realized that he would be leaving tomorrow. This meant that the hard-won peaceful time between them was coming to an end. The intersection of people's lives was hard-won, but it could be severed so easily, especially for her and Tom, who had disliked each other at first sight. I and the silence. The corridor wall lamp buzzed and suddenly burst. Only a faint light seeped through the crack of Amy's bedroom door. Did the light bulb burst? Yeah. Tom turned off the wall lamp switch and walked over to check. "Do you have a spare?" "I think so." Amy wasn't sure. She searched the utility room for a while and found a yellow light bulb of a similar size. Tom was tall enough to reach the wall lamp cover without moving a stool. He stood diagonally opposite Amy's room. With just a glance, he could see into her room through the crack of the door. It was small but tidy. There was a long-haired carpet on the floor, and several pieces of clothing were neatly piled on it. Thanks to years of training, he caught a glimpse of a light red lace-trimmed item on top. He lowered his eyes, screwed in the light bulb, and then walked over to press the switch. The bright white light was replaced by a soft, ambiguous warm yellow light. In the quiet night, with the dim light, Amy felt a bit stuffy in her heart. She leaned against the wall and suddenly asked, "Do you often go on missions like this, Captain Tom?" Was this a common thing for him? Moving into a woman's house without explanation, changing a light bulb in the middle of the night, and almost kissing her when he was delirious from a fever. Tom paused. In fact, the protection order he applied for yesterday wasn't approved. On one hand, there was a shortage of police force. As Mike said, Amy's situation wasn't so critical that she needed 24-hour close protection after being rejected. Tom said, "Then I'll apply for 3 days of sick leave." "Are you throwing a tantrum?" "I'll carry out the mission in my personal capacity, not in the name of the police." Please approve my leave, sir. In the delicate atmosphere, Amy's question was like throwing the question from over a month ago back in his face, were they a good match or not? Tom wasn't sure that he chose to remain silent. Amy didn't go to the police station to see the captured murderer and wasn't the least bit curious about why the person had framed her. A total stranger, Tom left her house early the next morning. They didn't even run into each other, only the dim wall lamp in the empty room proved that he had been there. Mike, on the other hand, got Amy's WeChat ID and occasionally sent her a text message to say hello. He said that the frostbite ointment she gave was really effective and had been passed around the police station. After that, he added gossipily, Captain Tom's hands were frostbitten too, but after it was passed around, there was none left. He didn't look too good, I think. Amy said. Your Captain Tom always has that poker face, no matter what. Mike said, that's true. He's been especially like that lately. During training, he's been pushing himself like he's not human. He's like a demon. Amy said, maybe he's having a bad day. Mike suddenly fell silent. 2 minutes later, he sent a crying face emoji. Ah, I was caught by Captain Tom. He punished me to run 8 kilometers with weights. Woo-woo. Goodbye, Ms. Amy. Amy. Wasn't it just a joke? He got so angry after a few days of relaxation at home. Amy received a call from her mother. Her mother didn't know about the short but eventful scare Amy had gone through. Amy was about to go out at that time. She had a dark-colored bucket bag hanging on her arm and was half leaning against the shoe cabinet, changing her shoes. The phone was on speaker. What's up? Her mother's voice sounded unusually low. I had a dream last night. I dreamed that you had a car accident in the rain. My heart has been pounding since I woke up. The panicked and desperate feeling in the dream still lingered. So she called Amy as soon as she woke up. Amy found it both funny and touching. She comforted her mother gently for a while. Her mother said, Amy, find a boyfriend and get married soon. I'll only be at ease when someone takes care of you. Ordinarily, Amy would have bombarded her mother with declarations of female independence. But this time, seeing her mother so worried, she couldn't bring herself to do it. The strap of her bag slipped onto her hand, and she replied calmly, got it. I'll give it a try if I meet the right person. After hanging up the phone, Amy let out a silent sigh. She opened the door and went out, then walked downstairs. The transparent glass door of the apartment building opened, and the cold air rushed in, stinging her face and neck. Amy subconsciously covered her bangs. She had spent half an hour curling them, and she still had to meet people, walking against the wind. She suddenly saw a man standing under the small staircase. He was wearing black clothes and pants, with a gray scarf around his neck. He was slightly turned towards the flower bed. Looking down as if lost in thought, Amy glanced at the trash can with a smoking stand next to the flower bed and understood why he was standing there. There were 5 or 6 cigarette butts on the stand. She wasn't sure if they were all his. She stood still for 2 seconds, then walked over with a natural expression. Captain Tom. What a coincidence. Tom turned around when he heard her voice. With his usual serious face, he said, it's not a coincidence. I'm here for you. The case of David finally came to a conclusion. Yvonne, who was caught, was just an accomplice. The real murderer was beyond Amy's expectations. You mean Lisa? Yeah. To put it simply, Lisa had fallen too deep in love with David. But a man like David was hard to control. Over time, her love turned into hatred. She knew that David was still coercing Yvonne in the company. With just a few words of persuasion, Yvonne obediently invited David to a lover's hotel. When Yvonne realized that Lisa wanted to kill David, she was in too deep and could only help smear the blood on Amy's car. Because of her panic, she remembered the model of Amy's car but forgot to check the license plate number. After hearing the whole story in front of the windy apartment, Amy felt mixed emotions. She didn't know whether to sympathize with the 2 women's experiences or be angry at their stupid actions. After all, crime was crime, no matter how despicable David was. He was still a human life. Tom said that the prosecutor's office was ready to file a lawsuit. Amy nodded. Thanks for coming all the way to tell me. She was being unusually polite. Tom raised his eyes and tried to see her clearly through the morning mist. Her makeup was exquisite. She was wearing a well-tailored overcoat, a high-quality dark gray sweater inside, and dark-colored wide-leg pants. On her feet were a pair of dark brown ankle boots. She looked soft and clean. Going out. Amy nodded and glanced at her watch. Is there anything else? I'm almost late. I have something to say, but it's not urgent. Let me give you a ride. As if afraid she would refuse, Tom added, the thug who harassed you in front of the police station was released a couple of days ago. It turns out he has some shady connections. I'm worried he might come after you. Amy was taken aback. She blurted out, just released. I thought. Tom laughed. Thought I released him that day. Amy pursed her lips. His words that day had implied exactly that. He had accused her of using excessive force and venting her personal anger. Tom led her to a temporary parking space at the entrance of the community. They got in the car. As he turned on the navigation, he said, don't think you can be fearless just because you've learned martial arts for a few years. It's our police's job to uphold justice. You just need to protect yourself. Amy was lowering her head to fasten her seatbelt when she heard these words. Her heart felt as if it had been hit by a snowball. After a moment of icy coolness, a warm feeling spread through her body, all the way to the tips of her ears. He was only in his 20s. What did he mean by police uncle? Tom drove to a trendy coffee shop in the city center according to Amy's directions. He thought Amy had an appointment with a friend for morning tea there. The car stopped across the street. Amy took her coat from the back seat and was about to put it on when her phone rang. She answered it. Hello. A deep male voice came from the other end. Ms. Amy. Have you arrived? Yeah. I'm across the street. As she spoke, she rolled down the car window and waved at someone in the coffee shop. Tom looked in the direction she was waving. His eyes landed on a man in his 30s, sitting by the window. The man was dressed in a suit, and his hair was neatly groomed, making him look youthful. Was she here for a blind date? The man saw Amy and waved back with a smile. Sorry to invite you here so early. I have an 11 o'clock flight today, so I'm in a hurry. Tom couldn't hear what the man said. He could only hear Amy soften her voice and reply politely and gently. It doesn't matter. I can adjust. After all, work is important. They had known each other for a while, but she had never spoken to him in such a tone. Tom held the steering wheel with one hand, and a jumbled mass of emotions welled up in his heart. He felt irritable. The two of them exchanged a few polite words on the phone. The man said, we don't need to talk across the street, do we? Amy smiled. I'll come over right away. After hanging up the phone, she smoothly put her right hand into the sleeve of her coat. She checked her makeup in the compact mirror again and said to Tom, I think this will take a while. You can go ahead and do your own thing. Or if it's not too much trouble, you can just message me on WeChat. As she was about to open the car door, she heard the car lock click. She turned around in confusion. Tom's Adam's apple bobbed. I need to talk to you. Can we talk after I'm done here? He interrupted her. No. As if afraid she would run away. Tom grabbed her wrist. His eyes were deep and intense. Everything has its order. Amy was completely confused. Then her mind started to wander. She frowned. Didn't they say today's interview was just a formality? Had the position already been filled? And how did Tom know about it? Before she could figure it out, Tom started speaking. I'm 28 this year, and I'll be 29 after the new year. I work in the criminal investigation team. I'm usually busy with work. But I don't have any other distractions. All my free time after work is yours. My parents live abroad and they come back occasionally. They don't pressure me about marriage or having kids, so there won't be any problems in that regard. I don't have a lot of savings, but we won't be short of money if we're together. I have a good reputation and I don't mess around with other women, except for my smoking habit. I don't have any bad hobbies. He rambled on for a long time. Amy listened blankly and gradually realized what he was getting at. She didn't look up. Her eyes fell on the back of his hand that was holding her wrist. His knuckles were red, and there were 2 new sores. She thought that there was probably still 1 tube of ointment left at home. When Tom ran out of words, she replied, Didn't you say we weren't a good match? These words had bothered her for a long time. That day, her mother had sent her a photo out of the blue, saying only, meet him or not. Amy took a quick look and replied firmly, meet him. Who would have thought that before the meeting was even arranged, he had refused to meet her just by saying, not a good match, without even looking at her photo. Amy was so angry that she had that chaotic first encounter at the police station. This was a difficult situation. Tom subconsciously wanted to smoke again. He tightened his grip on her wrist slightly, and his thumb unconsciously rubbed against the back of her hand a couple of times. He replied slowly, "We really aren't a good match." She was beautiful, lived a bourgeois lifestyle, and was unrestrained. While he had climbed up from the training ground and saw the ugliest sides of society every day, they really didn't seem to fit. Amy could tell from his expression that he meant it. She was so angry that she laughed. She tried to pull her hand away with force. Tom pressed her neck and pulled her towards the driver's seat. Their jaws touched, and the warmth of his skin seemed to set off the rapid beating of the blood vessels under the skin. It was clear and intense. "Ask me another question," Amy said angrily. "What?" Tom held her in his arms, and his voice reached her ears with a slight current. "Ask me if I like you or not."